All right, well, let's get started. Man, I need to come up with like some grander name, right? Fantastic families. I don't know. Fantastic doomsday, because I don't know. We're going to talk about pain and suffering. I'm not sure how to really counter that, but I'm sure you that are here, you already have fantastic families, so no need to attend that. So glad you're here with us. Becky was deciding, do I walk her? She's going to get up and walk off. She's going to walk off right now. So off she goes to fantastic families. I'm not sure how to take that. All right. She's heard me plenty. So we're going to talk about the story of Job, right? And I'm excited about having 12 weeks to talk about the story of Job. I've taught it many different times in different settings, but never with that amount of time. So I've always had to like summarize and this is what these 30 chapters are about, and just highlight a couple things. So I'm excited to be able to walk through a lot of that. We're not going to walk through verse by verse because we don't have that much time, but I'm really looking forward because there's so many profound, interesting, important aspects of the story that I have not often had the opportunity to focus on, and so I'm excited about that. What I want to do today is just kind of introduce a little bit the story, and then talk about some foundational questions, and then next week forward, we're really going to get into some of the text of the storyline of Job. But when you think of Job, I think a couple things come to mind. One is the reference of it in the New Testament, where Job is kind of this example of perseverance. Or the patience of Job. I think that's even part of, sometimes in our vocabulary, the patience of Job. And without doubt, there's something important to be said about that. Or at times, when you think of the story of Job, you think of the idea of why do the innocent suffer? And that's a question that I think many people have contemplated and still do over the centuries and over humanity. And definitely a very important question, and we're going to see what Job answers to that. But the story of Job, there's so much more here. First, the story of Job, it starts like with this, almost, if you're a Star Wars fan, like Once Upon a Time in a Galaxy Far, Far Away, it starts with that kind of language, with that kind of idea. And the story does not have details or too many details that would pinpoint a time frame of Job, which to the academic world that loves to go down rabbit holes on all that, there's all kinds of discussions. I don't think that's because the story was not factual. I think the author of the story of Job did so intentionally. Because the story of Job, the stuff the story of Job addresses is universally questioned. And you could put the story of Job just about at any time in history. World War II and the mess that was going on there. What does the story of Job address that would have been relevant there? Or when Israel fell to the Babylonian Empire in 587. Well, that would have been a very relevant story to be told then, or just about any other time in history. So I think by design, it's not trying to get the reader to be like, oh, and this was, 587, or this was later or earlier, but to be like, in my time, what does the story of Job address that is relevant to the pain and suffering I'm in, that our society is going through? So I think it's by design, it's made to easily fit any time as we contemplate the pain and suffering. Two, it does say from the land of Uz, and we're like, what does that mean? I think that's noted there because it makes it clear one detail that's, I think, relevant in terms of like geography and so forth, is that Job is not an Israelite. And neither are his friends. His friends are going to show up, and they're from some places none of us ever heard of, but none of them are Israelites. And I think that's interesting because here you have a bunch of non-Israelites, right, from pagan worlds, contemplating the question of pain and suffering through the perspective of Yahweh, the God of Israel. which is really kind of this fascinating thing going on with that. And so a couple layers of that. One is the questions and the tension that the story of Job presents is it's of universal interest, I think is one layer of it. Two, they're going to contemplate God, Yahweh, Lord God, in a world of gods. And I think it's important how they're going to address that, and we'll walk through it as we go. But for now, just note that. Let's start here, chapter 1. So in the land of Uz there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. Let's stop right there. So here's the narrator introducing you the story, right? It's kind of like, once again, just setting the stage. We're not yet in the details of Job and others and some things that are going to go on. They're really fascinating. It's like, here's the main character of the story, Job. And he's a non-Israelite, and he was blameless, upright, feared God, and shunned evil. What kind of life should that kind of person have? Think about it. If you're that dedicated, right? If you're faithful, you shun evil, and there's all those words there. I mean, that phrasing is going to put us in Proverbs here in a second. But if you're living this out of the norm type of life, what kind of life should you have? Now, that ancient world, that was a consistent part of people's day-to-day. We have the gods, right? And everybody had some god, or many gods. And so they had the tribal god and the family god, and the empire had their gods, and the neighboring empire had their gods. And the gods were often kind of like sometimes petty, cruel, benevolent, drama-prone. If you ever watched any movie like with the Greek gods, it's kind of like that. And you're going to go about your day-to-day mindful that the gods reign the cosmic world. In whatever they do up in the heavens, you get the results of it down here, which is how the story is going to unfold in a little bit. So whatever the gods do in the heavens, you're going to get the results down here. And so, but you can do things in your life to appease the gods, to please the gods, and to get benevolence from the gods, or for them to not be cruel against you, or for them to protect you. And so you would try whatever God you think is the better God that gives you more odds to be blessed. You would then live a life that would please that God in hopes that that life matches what the God wants from you, and thus you have a good life. Right? So in that world, here's a man who's having an extraordinary, amazing kind of faith. Not more, and it's intentional, and it will be repeated 2-3 different times, and even confirmed by God that Job is indeed like this. I mean, if we can go with the word perfect, and there's some limits there, but I'd say that's as close as perfect as you're going to get in the kind of life you're going to live. And yet, if we bring that to modern times, and the world still believes in plenty of gods, but our Western world here not so much. But do we still not live in a way that we expect to have some kind of life in return? Right? If we're good citizens, we work hard, we're self-motivated, we're like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. I mean, we're just committed, we can live the dream, and like we're just going to live the life that we deserve. Let me present the same thing differently. If you have children, have your kids ever said to you, "That's not fair"? What are they tapping into? What are they? They're trying to get their way. But what's their reasoning when they say it's not fair? What's assumed? There is a way that should be fair. that the world should be fair, right? If they're good kids, they should have a popsicle. I mean, I don't know, whatever they're trying to argue. Because we assume that we deserve a certain type of life if we do certain type of things. Work hard, I should get a raise, right? If I'm committed and zealous and dedicated, I should get the prize. So the sense of live a life and get the certain reward. The concept of fairness. If we can go with some other words out there today, equality, or the problem of inequality, justice versus injustice. It's all the same concept. We assume the world should function a certain way. That makes sense. Cause and effect. What goes around comes around. The American dream, fairness, equality. Once again, you're phrasing it, I'm phrasing it. It's the same thing, just said differently. And I think that's at the heart of the story here. If you live the life of Job, what kind of experience should you have with that, right? If you have that kind of faith, what kind of life should you have? Well, let's go to a biblical source, Proverbs. Let's go to Proverbs. Let's look at some compare and contrast. If we were measuring the life of Job by Proverbs, what kind of life should he have? For example, it says that he's blameless and upright. So let's go to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 21 to 26. My son, do not let wisdom and understanding out of your sight. Preserve sound judgment and discretion. Okay, so here's a certain path, right? Live this path, God's wisdom, certain path. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck, and here's what kind of life you will have from this journey. Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of sudden disaster or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked. For the Lord will be at your side and will keep your foot from being snared. Well, that sounds about right. Does it not? Let me bring it to maybe even closer to home. If I follow Jesus, what kind of life should I have? What kind of blessings should I expect? What kind, in the journey in the path of follower of Jesus, quote unquote Christian, what kind of life what should God be doing for me? Well, I like these verses. Right? It sounds good. I mean, it sounds like a good life there. How about chapter 2, just the next page over, verse 6 through 8. For the Lord gives wisdom from his mouth, come knowledge and understanding. So here's the kind of path we would follow, right? Verse 7. He holds success in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the ways of his faithful ones. Well, that also sounds biblical, doesn't it? Can we put a bunch of other verses that go along with this? If you follow God, especially if you look through Proverbs. So Proverbs it simplifies life in two paths. Two paths. The way of wisdom and the way of folly. Now let's just pause there and ask the question. Have you ever said to yourself, or have you ever heard anybody that say, I'm a fool? The path I choose is one of stupidity. Anybody? Don't raise your hand, please. All right? I mean, no. Hey, come on. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, when I grow up, I want to have a miserable life and I want to be a fool. Nobody says that. So whatever that folly must be, it can't be that simple. Because once again, nobody wants to have that kind of life. So Proverbs, wisdom and folly. It's a journey. They're presenting a lifestyle. They're not presenting one random act. Even a fool shows wisdom if he keeps his mouth shut. I like that one, right? So even a fool can be wise. Now, wise people make foolish choices, so he's not talking about one moment in time or one specific act or one topic. He's talking about a path, so a lifestyle. And the path of wisdom is one who is following the definitions of God of what life is, right? The day-to-day, this practice, this worldview of God. The alternative then is, if you're not following the wisdom of God, any other path is the same path. It's folly. If you do what's right in your own eyes, which is also here in chapter 3, it says, do not be wise in your own eyes. In other words, that alone, hashtag whatever makes you happy. Okay, this wrong crowd. Forget the hashtag. Most of you don't know what that means. If you just follow the concept of, I'm going to do whatever makes me happy because who better to decide what's right and wrong than me? Does that sound familiar at all? Ever? Right? I'm the one that should decide what's right and wrong. Okay, that is folly. Is folly. So you shun evil, which once again, don't think like cartoonish. I never lit a candle on behalf of Satan, and I never pillaged villages or, okay, that's not what he's saying. He's saying shun this worldview of I'm going to define for myself what's right and wrong. That is the essence of evil. So instead, here we got a guy who's instead of that, he's following God, which is the very next phrase about him is he feared God and shunned evil. So back to Proverbs 3, verse 7 and 8. Do not be wise in your own eyes, right? That's what I made reference to. Instead, fear the Lord and shun evil. Is that not exactly what it's saying about Job? Okay, what consequences, what kind of life should we have then? Verse 8, this will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Do you know anything about the story of Job? Spoiler alert, he's going to be sick, physically sick. Not just slightly sick, horribly sick. So, that's already kind of weird, right? We're getting ahead of ourselves there. But chapter 6, go to chapter 6, verse 12. Chapter 6, verse 12 through 15. A troublemaker and a villain who goes about with a corrupt mouth, who winks maliciously with his eye, signals with his feet, and motions with his fingers, like basically a person that's not following God. Verse 14, who plots evil with deceit in his heart, he always stirs up conflict. Okay, what kind of life you're going to have? Therefore, disaster will overtake him in an instant. He will suddenly be destroyed without remedy. Does anybody remember the horrible day that Job has when everything falls apart in one moment? Right? One moment's time, just. So you're already being like, I'm already hinting at at attention the story of Job's going to present. We like the concept, and it seems to be biblical, right? We're reading verses here that if you follow the path of wisdom, if you follow God, if you're faithful to Jesus, if you're kind and benevolent and committed, and you're a good person, and you come to church and you do, you should have a life that's blessed, that reflects that existence, should we not? Then a little further down here, it's going to say that Job, and we'll read that in a little bit, but it's going to say that Job is the greatest man among the East, of the people of the East. Well, that sounds pretty impressive, puts him in kind of this out of the ordinary category. Chapter 8, verse 17 to 21 of Proverbs. Here's what wisdom personified on behalf of God says. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honors, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasures full. Well, that sounds nice. If you just go then to verse 32, still chapter 8 to 36. Now then, my children, listen to me. This is wisdom once again. Blessed are those who keep my way. Listen to my instructions and be wise. Do not discard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching daily at my door, watching at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death. Well, that sounds intense. So basically, if you follow God, if you follow God's wisdom, God will be favorable to you. If you don't, and take on any other path, that you think is best, you're really getting yourself in trouble. You're setting yourself up for a lot of pain and suffering, and even the ultimate idea of death. Well, that kind of makes sense to us. It's comforting in a sense, like there's kind of cause and effect, right? You do this, good things come to you. You do bad things come to you. And that's a world we can kind of get our minds around. And even if bad things happen to it because we've done bad things, we might not like it, but we get it. We understand. Well, back to Job. It seems that his life's going to make good sense. So let's read it again, chapter 1, verse 1. In the land of Uz, there lived a man whose name was Job. This man was blameless and upright. He feared God and shunned evil. And here's the life he has. He had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and he owned 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 donkeys, and had a large number of servants. He was the greatest man among all the people of the East. Now, I don't know about you. I'm not necessarily looking to have thousands of donkeys or sheep or whatever. We have some chickens. I'm sure I'm feeling like the greatest man in Piedmont, right? We have some chickens and some ducks and 3 cats and a dog. That's probably enough. But what is it saying? In that world, this man was like beyond absurdly rich. He was a man extremely well off with a large family, especially in that world. I think still today to a degree, but in that world, the more kids you had, the more blessed you were. To not be able to have a child for whatever reason was considered a curse of the gods. So big family, happy family, lots of animals, right? Big portfolio. And well-known. So, well-known. Okay. Well, what about his family? What kind of spiritual leader was he to his family? Verse 4. His sons used to hold feast in the homes of in their homes on their birthdays, and they would invite the 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When a period of feasting had run its course, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, they would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking, perhaps my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. This was Job's regular custom. He was so worried about his family's well-being that even at the possibility that they've missed the mark, right, which is a good definition of the word sin, they missed the mark, he tried to appease God, offer something on behalf of them. And very thoughtful, and it says this was his regular practice. Now, most of us don't go about it that particular way. We're not offering sacrifice or anything. But think about it. Have you ever prayed for your children? Have you ever prayed for your children? Is it just every once now and then, kind of, every 10 years, just to make sure they're still on the right track? No, it's a consistent, intense, because what do we know? That the world is a horrible place. And that there's so many reasons and so many things that could really set them to the wrong path. And so we beg God implore God, be with our children, guide them, protect them, if they just forgive them and help us, in spite of us, raise them to be good kids and so forth. And so that's his consistent commitment to God and to his family, is to intercede on behalf of God, on behalf of his family to God, because he believes that in a world of gods, which was definitely any ancient Near Eastern world, Yahweh is the God to intercede with. Right? He's God. It is God where you want to go with. And this was his regular custom. So once again, I think the narrator is trying to introduce us to this concept to kind of tap into this idea of, doesn't this make sense? Great man, not just a good average Christian, like an amazing, out of the ordinary, super faithful kind of person. And he has a great family, and he has a blessed life, and it makes sense, and it can be even something for us to aspire to. I want to be faithful like so-and-so, and maybe some people come to your mind. People that are examples of faithfulness, and they have good lives. And you're like, that makes sense. And so, not that we necessarily might go as far as like thinking of Jesus or God as some kind of genie, right? Or like Siri, you just kind of press the button and do-do-do, how can I help? I don't think we'd go that far, but it makes sense that we have a good life if we follow God. Does it not? Well, what happens when that doesn't play out? Proverbs seems to think it should. I think perhaps most of us would be on board with a life that makes sense that way. Good things, good life, bad things, bad things. You do bad things happen to you. What happens when that does not work that way? What does that say about God? What does that say about our theology, our worldview? What does that say about concept of justice, fairness, equality? I asked a friend once in Brazil. He's grew up with him. We've just been good friends since first grade, and he's a lawyer. And so we were having this conversation one time there in Brazil about the idea of justice. And I was trying to explain to him, or ask him, what does that even mean, justice? And his explanation was different than I expected. He said from the legal perspective, and this is Brazil, I'm not sure how it goes here, but it might overlap. He says from the Brazilian legal system, justice means that you were rightly represented, right? You're being accused of something, so you have good representation on your side. The process moves along, right? There's the defender, the accuser, you have a speedy trial, and the trial is done fairly and correctly, and you have a group of your peers who are there to assess. Facts are presented, the case is made, things are articulated, you're represented, the DA is there, the judge is there, and you go through that process. And if you went through that process correctly, regardless of the outcome of your trial, justice has been done. Well, it's a little different. I would think justice is done when those that need to be punished are punished. But apparently not through the legal eye. And I need to talk to a lawyer here. But so it's about process to that definition. How do most of us think of justice? Like out in the public square. Is it really about processes? Or is it about you get what you deserve? I would lean more that way. In a very simplistic way, you get what you deserve, good or bad. Now, I don't know if I want to push too hard on that, because then if we start overlapping with the idea of, of the biblical perspective, what does humanity at large deserve? What did Paul say, right, in Romans 3:23? All have sinned, and that's problematic. And he also says in chapter 6, the wages of sin, in other words, the payment you get, what you deserve is death. So I don't know how hard we want to push on that, but I would say out in the public square, towards what my friend defined as justice versus you get what you deserve, I would say it mostly leans this direction. You think that's fair, an assessment? Well, I'm not sure where we even put the story of Job in that sliding scale when it comes to justice. Because in Job's perspective, who does he believe is ruling the universe? God. Right? God. Have you ever just kind of shook your head and wondered, I don't think our leaders are doing a good job? Never, ever, right? Just me. You just scratch your head, and I don't even mean just now. Like, you pick any 50 years of humanity. You just scratch your head, and you're like, I don't think things are running right. Maybe you've thought that of your job. Right? So I don't know who's in charge here, but come on. Who's making these decisions? Or even if you're watching a coach, like your favorite sports team, right? And you're like, God, like, why? Who? Why did you make this call? Like, we start challenging those that are in charge, that their decisions of ruling, right? They have influence, they're over things, and they make decisions, and people under them just get the consequences. Does that make sense? One reason why, when like a team has a bad season, who gets fired? I think all the players should get fired. Well, no, they fire the coach. Right? They fire the coach. Some sports teams, when that faithful day that will go down in infamy, when World Cup final and Brazil loses to Germany, I think it was 6-1, 7-1. It was like so painful I stopped counting. I wanted everybody to be fired. The players, the coach, the water boy, the masseuse, the doctor, the guy that mowed the grass, the person getting the tickets at the counter. Everybody needed to go. Because it's like, you don't understand. It'd be like the dream team, remember the original dream team, Michael Jordan, all those guys. They go and they lose like 70 points to Papua New Guinea. You understand they don't even have a basketball team, just trying to really make a point here. How absurd would that be? Right? So something horribly was mismanaged somewhere. Now, we can get that from our politicians, and we scratch our head, and no matter what side you're on, surely you're still, you can be like, something needs to be done better. Yeah, what about when God's ruling the world? Can we then scratch our heads and wonder what's going on there? Have you looked at the world recently? Does it look like somebody's in charge? If somebody's in charge of this, what are they thinking? It's horribly mismanaged, and I'm being kind, is it not? So if God's in charge somehow, where do we inevitably get with this conversation? Like, what's up with God? And so here, you think like, oh, yeah, that's cute, and there's this guy, and he's got a wonderful life, and great man, and okay, the narrator is setting us up for a world of conflict and tension as we read the story. So you might want to think about joining that Fantastics family, because it's going to get kind of tough. It's going to get kind of hard, because we're going to inevitably have to challenge God. I wouldn't sit too close, right, in case I'm zapped and punished, it's possible. But the story's going to take us to places that it's going to be really uncomfortable, but inevitable, in hopes that somehow the story gets us somewhere with more clarity at the end of it. Because you can start putting two and two together, and it's, You start to wonder. And of course, maybe you're quite comforted that there's the Satan here, and there's Satan, he's here, and so we can just blame him and we're done with that. Well, just come back for that class, and we're going to see how that goes. So the story is setting the stage once again to questions that any moment in history, any time period, can easily be contemplated. Did you see why I think it kind of starts with this, like, once upon a time there used to be this man and he was great. Once again, not that it wasn't factual, but I think it's intentionally framed in a way to be like, and this story is very relevant today and yesterday and 500 years from now and 1,000 years ago. Because inevitably, we're all struggling with this concept of who's in charge, why is it a mess, what do I do with it, what about justice, what about fairness, what about equality, and then if we follow God, shouldn't that mean something? Shouldn't that have some measurable, reality influencing my reality for good? Now, I'm comforted that there's a heaven and there's something beyond this mess. And listen, I'm Jesus, let's just be done with it. That's my prayer. Feel free to join me. I was hoping we'd be done with this before my kids became teenagers. But I'm supposed to learn something, I think. And so pray for us there. So let's be done with that. So I'm comforted by that inevitability. But until then, shouldn't following God have some kind of bearing, some kind of positive, some kind of, benefit package? Do we have like a basic benefit package that comes with Christianity? Or are we just kind of like, let's just see what happens? Well, I think some benefits would be nice. And once again, if we just stop the story right there, and then we just go to the New Testament, and Job was a great example of perseverance. And then he loved Jesus, and now let's go to heaven. We'd be done. It'd be a great story. But then there's a whole lot of other things. Like, for example, and we'll just start on this, and we'll get to this, get deeper into this next time. Then verse 6. So we're all feeling warm and fuzzy until verse 5. And then verse 6. One day, the angels, does anybody have anything else there than angels? The sons of God, and that's a fun rabbit hole. So one day, the sons of God came to present themselves before Yahweh, Lord, right? In the world of spiritual beings, Lord God. So this is the God of the Bible, right? Yahweh. And who else comes along? The Satan, which is actually how you say it. Satan. Does anybody have a little kind of footnote? What does Satan literally mean? The adversary. The adversary also comes along. Okay, so the ancient world believed reality to be divided in two. The world of the heavens and this physical realm. So don't think like where birds fly or the atmosphere, just the above. So the gods or the spiritual beings live in the above. So think like the Greek mythology there, Mount Olympus, way high, so above. And the rest of us peasants were down here. So the ancient world believed there's two realms, the world of the heavens and this physical reality. So another way to say it is the spiritual world and the physical world. I mean, that's not too far, right, from how we think of the cosmos. So in the world of the heavens, there are the gods ruling. How's this story go? Up, like, right? One day, the angels, so like this, all of a sudden, we're in the heavens. And it's like some cosmic throne room. And there's the sons of God or the angels. Angels gets a little complicated because we normally think of winged individuals, right? Oh, caw, and they're just flying around. Okay, no, take that out of your head. There are no winged individual, no people with wings in the Bible. There are winged creatures, and they're the seraphim and the cherubim. And they're these like animal-looking, weird-looking kind of creatures, and there's whole reasons for that. So don't think any like, or little plump babies with a little harp, and they're like, yeah, no. So let's maybe not use that word, angels, because then wrong imagery. So there's these sons of God. Sons of God. Next time, we're going to get into more details where else in the Bible do we have that sons of God? And it gets trippy. But so be thinking about that. Where else do we have the sons of God? The sons of God are in the heavens and they look down. Maybe that's enough. So we'll talk about that next time. So the sons of God, so the imagery is this, think of like kings, right? It's like the king calling his royal court to discuss kingdom business. You get the imagery? Royal court, king, kingdom business. And here comes the royals, right? The royals, the sons of the kingdom. So here comes the royals. And who comes with these this Satan thing? The devil? Something different? You just have to wait for that class. So, chew on that one. And so now here's in the heavens, the gods are making decisions, kind of imagery, which is just about how every person in that ancient world believed. The gods do their thing. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's petty, sometimes it's cruel, sometimes it's weird, sometimes it's corrupt. Think like our politicians, but then just add some divinity to them. And then they rule the world, and then we get the short end of the stick, which is exactly what's going to happen with the story of Job. So I'm not stretching it with the whole intro of like, is God responsible, not responsible? Who's ruling the madhouse? I'm like who's in charge of this thing? That's exactly where the story's going to go. And it gets really trippy because once again, we're going to talk about this Satan. If this is the devil, I don't think I have a category where the devil is just coming before God and they're hanging out and having a chat. Is that your understanding? If this isn't the devil, isn't Beelzebub, or we call him in Brazil capeta or chupacabra in some other place. So like all kinds of fun names. If he's not the devil, then what is this? Is this like part of the royal court somehow? Is this like somebody working for God? And now that's going to get quite trippy as we see how the conversation goes. So either direction, and like I said, I'll make a case for one or the other, but it's not going to be pretty. Saved by the bell, right? It's like, we still have 5 minutes, or that's it? Okay, there's still 5. So it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be pretty. But I want you to be, and we're really going to stop there, because next class, next Wednesday, we're going to talk about that. The rule of God in the heavens. That's going to be our emphasis. And we're going to look at chapter 1 and 2. There's 2 instances that this get-together is going to happen. So they're going to get together. Some weird things are going to go on up there beyond what humanity can see and understand. And we somehow have a privilege into it, like we're a fly on the wall. And then some things are going to happen back down here in reality. So the gods do some things. We get the short end of it. If you've ever wondered in a prayer as you looked around at your own life or even scratched your head today and be like, God, why? Yeah, this class is for you. This is for you. Because there's going to be a lot of wondering why. And we're going to walk through some painful things. If you just thought of Job as like the epitome of perseverance and patience, he's going to say some things that you're going to get very uncomfortable with. Right off the bat. He's going to, chapter 3, going to get ugly. And we're just going to go from there. So I don't presume to answer all questions pertaining to faith and the problem of suffering, but we're going to really get into some heavy questions, maybe some answers as we go through this story, because inevitably it's very, very practical and relevant to you and I still today. let's have a prayer, and then we will get back into it next week. Dear God, we thank you for the opportunity. We thank you for the privilege to contemplate your rule. We thank you for your patience as we struggle and as we sometimes are critical and we're curious and we're confused with how the world unfolds, and ask ourselves, where are you, God? That you will be kind and compassionate as we continue on this journey together with this story that you have allowed us to have, so that we maybe can get to some answers, that we can get to some clarity, and that through this we can get closer to you. Thank you for Jesus. Thank you for your rule. In your Son's name we pray. Amen. Come back next week if you dare.